Welcome, welcome, welcome. I would like to welcome you to episode 569 of the Unpopular Podcast. This is the man, the myth, the legend, Jalen Hunter. Here at the Unpopular Podcast, not only ask you to agree with me, I'm asking you to hear me out. Let me just take y'all behind the curtain right quick. I work in sports, and one of the busiest time in sports is obviously March Madness. And my job just got incredibly hectic to the point where I was working 10, 12-hour days consecutively for a good little minute. And then on top of that, I got sick. So if you're wondering why I have not been, or I've not dropped an episode in a week and a half, almost 2 weeks, that is the case. I apologize. You may still be able to. I had a bad cold slash flu. You might still be able to hear a little bit, but I apologize for not getting anything out. Um, I appreciate you guys' patience for people that are still here. It was a rough point. I was in bed dying, but I appreciate you guys, and we are back. And where I wanted to start is the NBA agreeing essentially to an expansion, bringing two new teams. I'm not 100% sure if it is official that these are the two places, but the two cities that are supposed to be getting a team is Las Vegas and Seattle. I have some thoughts. Hell, a lot of people have some thoughts on this. You know, Tracy McGrady has said some things. Anybody that has pretty much had a sports podcast has said some things, and I have been on IR, so now it's time to throw my ideas in the ring. I don't know if you guys remember, but I was shocked when the Vegas Aces, I mean, not the Vegas Aces, the Golden Knights, the Vegas Golden Knights in what team? In hockey started, and they were incredible. I think in the first 5 years of their birth, they won a Stanley Cup final. And we were also talking about, well, if you want to go back to the WNBA, we were talking about the Valkyrie and how I believe in the first year, the Valkyrie made the WNBA playoffs. Now, obviously, we're talking about different sports organizations. We're talking about the WNBA compared to the NBA. We're talking about the NHL compared to the NBA. But this one thing remains true when we talk about these expansion teams. Usually, they're not supposed to be good in the beginning stages of the team. They have drafts where the teams that are still here or the teams that are here are able to put protection on players. Usually, your best player is not going to one of these expansion teams because you put a protection on them. I think teams usually have up to 4 or 6 protections. That means out of that, you're not getting the top 6 players or top 4 players from every team. So you're then able to have a draft with those players or with the rest of the league. That's usually how an expansion draft goes. On top of obviously being able to draw from college and everything. And because there's already a thought, an idea, an understanding that you're not getting the best players in the draft because you don't get the number 1, 2, but you don't get that. You're not getting the best players in the draft. And you also aren't getting the best players in the league. You're not going to be good, or you shouldn't really be good for the at least immediate, the early stages of the team, because the pool that you're drawing from just isn't the best of the best. Now, I do agree that the league talent wise, is in a place that we have never seen. Not saying that we haven't had better players, but when we talk about players this vast, as good as they are, when your sixth, seventh, eighth player can put up 10, 15, 20 points a game, okay, maybe 20 points, maybe 10, 15 points a game, you could get a good player. On top of, I know a lot of people are doing mock drafts and they're saying that, Seattle or um Vegas, one of those teams, are able to get someone like John Morant, that could help at least. But this is my thought. I understand. I kind of have the same opinion when you hear, or my opinion, my thoughts kind of a combination of what Gilbert Arenas said and what Tracy McGrady said. The only reason why you're hearing, because we've been hearing about expansion for the longest now, but the only reason why you're hearing that, oh, they're really getting serious about the expansion is because how much money owners would make when you get an expansion with the salary cap going up. They're going to make a lot more money with two more teams. And I I understand it. You know, we remember the old Seattle Seahawks days and how much Seattle loved their team. And I think Vegas, even though I believe Vegas, when you look at the numbers and you look at the revenue, everything, I believe Vegas is a dying city just because of how expensive it is and just how the economy is right now. But if they feel that Vegas is a place where they'll be able to grow and expand, and Vegas would be, you still have the entertainment there, you still have the MGM, you still have the Sphere. It's still a place for tourists. I don't know how many home fans you're going to be able to garner just because of how expensive it might be. I think that there's a lot better places that could use a team, could get a team, or should get a team before Vegas. But hey, I'm not the one making the decisions. If that's what their analytics says, that's what it says, that Vegas is the place. And you're also seeing that this is going to have a major effect on just the landscape of the league because now they're saying, the Minnesota Timberwolves, a team that has been to the Western Conference Finals 2 years in a row, plus the Memphis Grizzlies that has John Morant and everything, they are likely to go to the Eastern Conference just so that Seattle and Vegas can go, which is obviously on the Western, can go to the Western Conference. And I'm very interested to see uh what will happen with the Oklahoma City Thunder when you talk about their, if they go and become the Seattle Seahawks, if they renew that franchise, how that's going to change the Seattle Seahawks, seeing as though they were, the Oklahoma City Thunder was the Seattle Seahawks until it was bought out and moved. So I'm definitely interested in that. But here's the grand, here's the crux of it all. I understand that there are markets. I understand that there are huge markets, there are medium-sized markets, and there are small market teams. I know that you the league doesn't want to admit it because you want every fan base to feel like you have a shot at winning a championship. You have a shot at getting a top tier player. Once you realize, or once a lot of people realize you don't necessarily have a shot, it kind of affects you know, how you see things. It kind of affects how everything goes. It kind of affects the fact and the revenue because it's like, okay, look at the attendance rates. Look at the attendance rates for a high market team a high market team, especially towards the playoffs, even if they're out the playoffs, like the New York Knicks. Not saying that they're out the playoffs, but look at the attendance for the New York Knicks compared to the attendance for um, a small market team that's actually a pretty good team in the Charlotte Hornets. The attendance is much different because it's a lot easier to sell the New York Knicks than it is to sell the Charlotte Hornets or the Washington Wizards, or hell, if still a smaller market team, but I say medium sized market team in the Chicago Bulls. It's easier to sell the Boston Celtics than it is to sell the Wizards. That's just how it is because you got a top market team compared to a small market team. And that's always been the case. I can't remember even back with Bill Russell days. Bill Russell was playing again. The Celtics was just wiping people out because they just had the better players. They had the taller, best players. So I understand that you have small market teams and large market teams. That's just how it is. That's how it's been. My issue is I understand that it usually takes a long time or takes a minute before a team gets good. It usually takes a long time before an expansion team gets into a position where they can compete for a championship. One of the best examples that I can explain right now, or that I can remember right now when we talk about the NBA, is the Orlando Magic. The Orlando Magic, they got good. They were bad the first few years, but they were able to land a Shaquille O'Neal. They were able to land a Penny Hardaway Jr., and they were able to at least make it to what? An NBA Finals, but they had to land generate a generational talent in Shaquille O'Neal from LSU. If they didn't do that, it takes a while. My fear and my issue, and kind of what Gilbert Arenas said was, yo, it's going to be much harder when you look at just how much money these top tier teams are making. It's going to be much harder for a small market team to be able to just compete. Like, think about this. Oklahoma City is the reigning champion right now. Look how long it took and everything that happened for Oklahoma City, a small market team, to just make it to the NBA Finals back in 2000 and what, 12? Back in 2012 or 2011, 2012, 2012, compared to making it back to the NBA Finals and finally winning it in 2014 or no, 2024. Look at everything that happened. Look how many transactions had to happen just for the team to get back to the NBA Finals. Mind you, this team had Kevin Durant. This team had Russell Westbrook. This team had James Harden. This team had Paul George. This team had Carmelo Anthony. This team had Victor Oladipo. This team had what? What's his name? Serge Ibaka. Like, it takes a while, and my fear is when you look at a small market team like Seattle, when you look at a small market team like Vegas. I know Vegas seems like a big market due to tourism and stuff, but that doesn't necessarily equate to fans going to the games. I kind of I kind of look at ticket sales and sporting events the same way I look at ticket sales and tours and with music, right? You can have a viral TikTok song. You can have a viral Instagram song. You can have a viral song. You can have two or three viral songs. And much power to you. That's more than what a lot of people have. However, being viral, those viral songs don't necessarily get fans to see you. You know, those viral moments don't necessarily get fans to buy tickets to see you. Yeah, you can be in Vegas, but that doesn't mean people are going to go to Vegas. You're going to have a large population of fans. So I don't necessarily think Vegas is going to be a large market team. You know, like no matter how I know Vegas and tourism and stuff, you don't really hear about the living situations in Vegas. You don't really hear about the home people in Vegas and how most people don't even live in Vegas. Like they have to live in surrounding cities because Vegas is just that much expensive, you know? Um, I think that, I understand why. Anytime there's money to be made, it's going to be made when we talk about these organizations. Uh, I just don't know. And then that also bleeds into the Tracy McGrady thing. I don't know. I don't necessarily agree with him when he said that there's not enough talent to bring in two more teams. I don't necessarily agree with that, but what I do think is there's not top talent where you look and those two teams 2, 3, 4 years from now are competitive teams. Again, your top what 5, 6 players are going to be protected. So you're unless you're like a team like the Memphis Grizzlies, that's probably not going to protect John Morant, or you're somebody like the Atlanta Hawks. You're probably not going to protect, Jonathan Kaminga, depending on what the season looks like, depending on how much money they're trying to spend. The Wizards might not protect Anthony Davis. They might not protect Trey Young, but I doubt that very seriously. So it's like you're not going to get the best players. And it's just, I don't know how long it's going to take these teams because where I do agree with Trace McGrady is there's not enough talent with players that can carry a team. I don't think there's enough talent in the league for that. Like there's not enough cornerstones. There's not enough, you know. On top of that, when you look at the landscape of college basketball, I understand that there's a lot of great talent in the league right now when we talk about the freshmen and everything, but I don't know how many of those players can be your best player on an NBA team and that team be viable for a playoff berth or a play-in berth or a deep playoff run. I just don't see that. When you look at think about this. With LeBron James, Steph Curry, and Kevin Durant likely in the next 4 to 5 years, likely probably out the league, there's still a plethora. There's still a good pool of players. Victor Wembanyama, Giannis, Luca, Anthony Edwards. They're still good. Jason Tatum, Jalen Brown. They're still great players. Those players ain't going nowhere. On top of that, which goes back to Gilbert Arenas' point, if those players do get available, is Vegas going to have enough money? Is Seattle going to have enough money to outbid a top market team? 9 times out of 10, the answer is no. Why do you think? Look at the Wizards, right? And look at how they acquired Trey Young and Anthony Davis. Just 2, 3 years ago, you would say that those are top tier players. You know, they didn't go get the free agency and was like, I want to go to Washington. That didn't happen. They had to get traded. That's usually what happens with small market teams. Look at how Shea Gilgeous-Alexander, one of if not the best player in basketball, got to Oklahoma City Thunder. He didn't just choose to go. They traded for him. I, I'm all for expansion, man. I'm all for these teams coming to the league. I'm all for. I think that that gives you know people more opportunity because there's two more teams. But if we're being realistic, I don't know how long it's going to take for those teams to be competitive. It was a little easier for someone like the Orlando Magic when they came onto the scene to be competitive, but the league wasn't as good then than it is now. On top of the fact, money doesn't, it was a little easier to go to a small market team back then, even though it was still difficult because those small market teams had players. Like cards is kept for a good minute. Chicago was a small market. Chicago's a big market when you look at the U.S., but in basketball, it was a medium market team until they got Michael Jordan. You know, Seattle Supersonics. They were originally a small market team until they got Gary Payton and Sean Kemp. The Trailblazers until they got like I just don't think it's going to take a long. When you look at how much money is being generated from these teams, it's going to take a long time for a team like Seattle or a team like Vegas to even be competitive. Because while we just talked about, the Golden Knights in NHL and the Valkyrie in the WNBA. What about a team that we haven't talked about that actually started more recent than the Golden Knights, the Mammoth. In fact, the Mammoth, which is a team, the Utah Mammoth, right now their current record is 37-30-6, fourth in the Central Division. Do you think they have a shot of winning the Stanley Cup? They could. Who knows? I just don't. I don't see it. You have third. I don't see it. That's all I'm saying, man. Um, Again, I understand that it's gonna bring revenue to the league, to the owners, but when we talk about being competitive, there you're just adding two new teams. Who knows? But we'll see. Speaking of we'll see, when you when we talked about the Houston Rockets a year ago, um, they were in a playoff fight with the Golden State Warriors. And they ultimately lost that playoff fight with the Golden State Warriors. But when you looked, you had Dylan Brooks, you had Jalen Green, you had Alfred Sengun, you had Amin Thompson, you had Tari Eason, you have um, Fred Van Vliet. You think that team is, you just need more time, especially a team that's coached by Ime Udoka, who has been to an NBA Finals as the head coach of a team. You think all that, it's a very young team. They made very young mistakes in that playoff series. All they really need is time. And then when essentially you give up Jalen Brown or Jalen Green and Dylan Brooks and you bring in a Kevin Durant and you still have Alfred Sengun, you still have Amin Thompson, you still have Jabari Smith, you still have Fred Van Vliet, you have Reed Shepard. You think to yourself, oh, this This team has to be better, right? There's something that we've learned very quickly in his career, not necessarily. Actually, you know what? I'll say it like this. You know what? Kevin Durant's decision going to Golden State confirmed or told me, and subsequently what happened after Golden State, what told me Kevin Durant is an exceptional player. Hell, a, a lot of what we're about to talk about and what we're talking about now, you wouldn't necessarily notice, seeing as though Kevin Durant is having an all-time season when we talk about scoring. I think he just passed Michael Jordan, and now he's like fourth all-time, fifth or fourth all-time in scoring, and closing the gap between Karl Malone to get into the top four or three. So set this season, set the record and everything aside. Kevin Durant is having an incredible season. But you know what I realized, or you know what we realized after Kevin Durant went to Golden State? As great of a player as Kevin Durant is, Kevin Durant is a prime example of why people say you have to be more than a great player. A team has to have more than a great player to be competitive. Because when you look, man, Kevin Durant is an all-time player. I think Kevin Durant, in my opinion, is a top 10 to 15 player ever. But and yet, Kevin Durant hasn't sniffed an NBA finals since Golden State. And when you look, and the reason why we're having this conversation now is because even though you look at the record and the Rockets are what 43 and 29. That's not a terrible record. And if I'm looking at the standings, they are currently sixth, in the West, even though just a few days ago, I believe they were third. The sky isn't falling for Houston, but you would be disingenuous if you look at the Houston Rockets and say that they aren't performing the way you thought a team that just forced a game 7 with Golden State in the playoffs a year ago to essentially add Kevin Durant. You wouldn't they're not playing like that. They continuously blow big leads, and you can see the deficiencies on this team. And the deficiencies alone kind of make it seem like this team as they probably going to be an early exit team in the playoffs, which is kind of what I want to talk about. I want to I want to assess blame a little bit and talk about how and why we're here. A lot of people are going, and I possibly until you really watch these games, I was one of the people that said, "Oh, well, the reason why they're in this predicament is because they don't really have a point guard." I know Reed Shepard plays point guard, but Reed Shepard is not a de facto point guard. He's more of a scorer. On top of the fact that he doesn't really play defense like that. So, Reed Shepard's number one, two, three, and four go to is shoot that ball, and he can shoot. Don't get me wrong, but that's not going to when you need to run the. I'm not saying you need to be a Rajon Rondo, um, but you need to have some type of floor You need to be some type of a floor general, and that is not Reed Shepard at all. So when Fred Van Vliet went out, you could see these issues coming. And I'm not necessarily only blaming Reed Shepard and only blaming Fred Van Vliet injury, but I promise you that Fred Van Vliet's injury and the Houston Rockets deciding not to address getting a more typical point guard is one reason why we're here. It, do you know how infuriating it is when you're watching Houston go on a 10-0 run, and then all of a sudden you see Alfred Şengün, their center or power forward, depending on who else is in the game. Their power forward center is who is not a ball handler. He's not Nikola Jokic. Is walking the ball up the floor, and then all of a sudden gets ripped. Like, oh, there it goes. Yeah. Well, he's not a ball handler. Or this team, let's say Kevin Durant himself is on a 7-0 run, and all of a sudden you see Reed Shepard take 3 steps past half court and then let that jump go, completely miss, completely halting the momentum. That happens a lot when you look at these Hornets or Rockets games. That's what a floor general, a de facto point guard is going to be able to see that and be like, all right, no, this is how we do this. This is how we negate all this. Speaking of Alfred Şengün, let's talk about him for a second. Because when you hear Alfred Şengün, when people talk about Alfred Şengün, a name that a lot of people want to bring up is Nikola Jokic. And I know that for some reason, he's been crowned as baby Jokic. And a lot of people also want to say, well, Nikola Jokic doesn't play defense. Alfred Şengün doesn't need to play defense. Okay. Alfred Şengün is currently averaging 20 points a game, essentially 9 rebounds and 6 assists. He's actually leading the team in rebounds and assists. Alfred Şengün. On top of that, Alfred Şengün is also leading the team in turnovers. He's also leading the team in personal fouls. He's also second on the team in assist to turnover ratio. Next to, you guessed it, Reed Shepard. There's been too many times where I watched the Houston Rockets play and Alfred Şengün isn't having a good offense or defensive game because he's not a defensive player. So it's like, and I don't think you guys when I hear people say he's mini Jokic, I don't think you understand just how good Nikola Jokic is, which brings credence to how blasphemous that statement is. Um, you know what? You know what the Houston Rockets' biggest problem is? There's a bunch of puzzle pieces that don't fit. Kevin Durant, as much as you would think, adding Kevin Durant on the team that they had last year would be such an upgrade, which I do believe in a lot of instances, an upgrade. He doesn't fit alongside Alfred Şengün, who doesn't necessarily fit alongside Amin Thompson because Amin Thompson can't score or can't shoot the ball, which isn't helping that Tari Eason is having a absolutely horrible shooting year, which also doesn't help the fact that Jabari Smith is also having a horrible shooting year. This Rockets team has a bunch of one-dimensional players, just like the Lakers. The only issue is what they're supposed to be good at, they're not doing well. Jabari Smith is supposed to be a two-dimensional player. He's supposed to be a good shooter. He's not. Tari Eason was a good shooter before All-Star break. He is now one of the worst. I think he's shooting since All-Star break like 16% from three. And Kevin Durant, bro. I get it. Like, wait, you're telling me that here comes another double team. Here comes another double team because there's nobody else that can shoot the ball. You know, we've talked about it here, but this is yet another. And I understand you would think it'd be a great decision, especially after you see just the piece that they had, and maybe. And I'm not. Also let's talk about Ime Udoka for a second because Ime Udoka was touted as one of the best coaches in the league, especially when we talk about having to figure out offense or defense. You know, when he was the coach for Boston, one thing that they were always great at is defense. Hell, what last year, the Houston Rockets were pretty good at defense. Now, who would have known most of that defensive greatness, I guess, was on the back of Dylan Brooks because, and I'm in Thompson, because right now, this team defense is god awful. Like, they don't have any defenders outside of Amin Thompson. So when you're a coach and where's the defense? On top of the fact of you have to be creative on the offensive side of the ball. Yo, the Houston Rockets, as much talent as they have offensively, bro, one, they have one, two, three, four, five. They have six players currently that's averaging double digits. Their offense sometimes looks so elementary, and that's no offense. Like, I'm not shooting at anybody. That's just how it is. It just looks so bad. I'm like, bro, that couldn't have been. It's like a lot of standing around. If Alfred Şengün got the ball, everyone's standing around. If Kevin Durant got the ball, everyone's standing around. Even the person whose man is going to double team Kevin Durant. The thought that I started and didn't finish is it's unfortunate. It's great that Kevin Durant is having one of these years where obviously he's rising up the rank in all-time scoring leaders and everything. Um, Never gonna get to number one. I don't think anyone's gonna pass LeBron James in that, but I think he can get up to maybe three. Um, but when I look at this Rockets team, man, and I look at just the landscape of the West, I don't see them beating a Denver. I don't see them beating a Minnesota. I definitely don't see them beating Oklahoma City. I don't necessarily see them beating a San Antonio with Victor and Sam Cass or Stephon Castle. I don't, in the way they're playing, I don't know in a 7 game series if they'll be able to beat the Lakers with Luca and Braun in them. which means that this is probably going to be yet another stop where Kevin Durant doesn't even sniff. Bruh, you'd think you go to Brooklyn with Kyrie and then you ultimately get James Harden. You think that that's championship caliber move. It's not. Then you go to Phoenix, play alongside Devin Booker. You get Bradley Beal. Wasn't. Now you're in Houston, a team that was competitive as hell. And I'm not saying this on Kevin Durant. I'm not saying he's the problem, but what I'm saying is Kevin Durant shows you that like there's a few players in league history where if you have them on a team, you are instantly a championship caliber team. Kevin Durant has proven that that's not necessarily the case. Even though Kevin Durant is an incredible talent, one of the greatest talents we've ever seen. When you look at this Rockets team, bro, this team is not a championship caliber team. It's crazy how, as great as Ime Udoka is as a coach, at least how great as he's been uh, on the defensive side of the ball, this team is terrible defensively. Terrible. And it's like when you have an offensive weapon as great as Kevin Durant, it doesn't make sense how you have someone like Alfred Şengün, the center, dribbling the ball and just some of the shots he'd be taking. I'm like, bruh, what are you doing? Or Tari Eason just plummeting from the three. Yeah, man, it's crazy. Yeah. But we'll see, I guess. I could be hella wrong. Who knows? Speaking of hella wrong, before the season started, you couldn't tell me that anybody else outside of Cooper Flagg was even going to really be in contention to win the often or the rookie of the year. And then you got Kon Knueppel, which is hella crazy how both of these players played together in college and didn't win anything. But um when you look, I think it's an extremely tight race in the fact that they just played against each other and Kon Knueppel came up on top. Pauls. He had a 30 bird. When you look at the season, Cooper Flag, I'm sorry, is leading in points per game, rebounds per game, assists per game, steals per game, and blocks per game. However, it's not, points. Cooper Flag is averaging 20 points a game. Kon Knueppel is averaging 19. Uh, Cooper Flag is averaging 6.6 rebounds when Kon Knueppel is averaging 5.3. Assist. Cooper Flag is 4.7 when Kon Knueppel is 3.5. It's not that off. However, Kon Knueppel is leading in field goal percentage, 3-point percentage, free throw percentage, effective field goal percentage, BPM, and VORP. On top of the fact, Kon Knueppel has and the Charlotte Hornets have a much better record than than the Dallas Mavericks. Now, I do think it is also important to say that at this moment, and actually all season, Cooper Flag has been the number one player on Dallas. I know they expected to get Kyrie Irving back. They expected to pair both of them with Anthony Davis after the Luka Doncic trade. That clearly didn't happen because Kyrie Irving is not playing this season, and Anthony Davis has Washington strapped to his chest. So, in all intents and purposes, Cooper Flagg is more integral to his team than Kon Knueppel. However, seeing as though Kon Knueppel is not the best player on his team, you still have LaMelo Ball, you still have Brandon Miller. However, Kon Knueppel is pretty good. I would still go with Cooper Flagg. I know that Kon Knueppel, they have more wins, and then in the head-to-head, Kon beat him or beat the Charlotte Hornets, beat the Dallas Mavericks. However, I just think when you're still leading in points, rebounds, assists, steals, and blocks, and you're the number one player on your team, no matter the win, especially when you're a rookie, I would still give it to Cooper Flagg. However, I do think that this race is a lot closer than I originally thought it would be. So we'll see how it goes, but I would definitely probably still give Rookie of the Year to Cooper Flagg. Cooper Flagg has been incredible, bro. Like I know it was a slow start, but once he was and this is still his rookie year, so he should get better. But once the game slowed down for him, or once he picked his angles, and once he was like, okay, this is how you approach and attack the game, Cooper been going crazy. Cooper Flag, man, had 40-point games, a bunch of 30-point games. Yeah, he's one of them. And Colin Knueppel, I will say, is one of the best shooters in the league. When you're shooting essentially 44% from the 3-point line and 86% from three, I mean from field free throw, yeah, and you're shooting damn near 50% from the field. Yeah, no, that's kind of crazy. So, um, I'll still give it to Cooper Flag. So we'll see. Speaking of we'll see, and this is something that I don't, I think I missed because I was sick. Um, you guys know. If you don't know, I'll say it like that. If you don't know, I'm a huge North Carolina fan. North Carolina is my favorite overall sporting team. As much as I love the Wizards, as much as I love the Commanders, as much as I love, the Nationals, the Capitals, seeing as though I was born and raised in the Maryland, D.C. area. No, North Carolina Tar Heels is my team. My dad's side of the family's from there, and I remember watching Raymond Felton teams, Vince Carter, Anton Jameson, Brandon Haywood. I remember watching, Kendall Marshall and Tyler Hansbrough, Ty Lawson, who's from the crib actually. Um, North Carolina's been my team. And all of this is coming off Hubert Davis, who was hired in 2021 to essentially be the predecessor for Roy Williams, the great Roy Williams, might I add. Um, Hubert Davis is currently unemployed because he was essentially let go as the head coach of North Carolina. Um, Now, you guys know how I feel about African American coaches and how difficult it is, even though it's a little more open in the basketball realm. It's still difficult to be an African American head coach and find those opportunities. Um, and I also know that North Carolina, they love hiring from within. They love hiring from somebody in the North Carolina family. But I want to express to you that this is one of those very rare cases where records don't tell the whole story, and how not only am I happy, I'm not happy, not only do I understand why Hubert Davis is now currently not the head coach of the North Carolina Tar Heels, I feel like this should have been done a few years ago. You're going to look and say, well, damn, Jay, since 2021, he helped lead a team to the national championship against Kansas. They lost that, but they just 2 years after that, they won the regular season and made it to the tournament. And I think made it to the Sweet 16. Then they made the tournament last year. Then they made the tournament this year. This year, even though they lost in the first round to VCU, they were without their best player, Caleb Wilson. Um, all that is true. I also do believe that Hubert Davis has the two or coached the two most important wins in NCAA or in UNC history. Not the national championships, not the Final Fours, not the Michael Jordan game winner. The two most important North Carolina wins came Coach K's last game in at Duke, North Carolina, Hubert Davis, they played against North Carolina. North Carolina won. And then in the Final Four, which was Coach K's last game, North Carolina versus Duke, North Carolina won. If you don't understand rivalries, you're not going to understand it. But the fact that you handed Coach K a loss in his last game at home and in his last game as a coach, those are the two most important wins in North Carolina history. And they were just so happened to be coached by Hubert Davis. So why do I think that Hubert Davis, and why do I understand why Hubert Davis was fired? You're hearing a couple people talk about it, but when you have the blue blood label to your name, there's a level of excellence that you're supposed to have. Not necessarily saying that, you need to just dominate all year, but there's a level of excellence and there's a level of competition that you should have. And if we're being completely honest, that fire, that level of competition hasn't really been there for North Carolina. You're going to say, well, Jay, again, Hubert Davis led them to a national championship game. Yeah. And in that also shows one of the biggest issues that has followed Hubert Davis's entire coaching career at the University of North Carolina. Bro, they were up what, 19 points in the national championship against Kansas? 19 points at half and lost. The next year, they were the preseason number 1 overall seed because they brought back damn near everybody. They brought back Baycott. They brought back Caleb Love. They brought back RJ Davis. Didn't make the tournament that year. Then the year after blowing a 19-point lead at halftime against Kansas in the national championship, they didn't even make the playoffs the next year. But okay. You return, you come back 29-8. You're the regular season champ, the best team in the ACC. You make it to the tournament and you blow yet another lead. I believe this time, if I'm not mistaken, it was against Clemson. In fact, let's see. Yeah, it was against Clemson. The same year you saw NC State go on a historic run. And then last year, make it to the tournament, you lose. Made it to the tournament as a 9 seed. I think you lost the second week. And then this year, you have damn near a 20-point lead against VCU and blow yet another double-digit lead in the playoffs. Hubert Davis had a very tough time holding on to leads, large leads. That's not on the players, that's coaching. If for some reason you continuously lose double-digit leads, that's on coaching. On top of the fact, look, we've talked about it at nauseum at this point. Um, the league has changed. College basketball, college sports has changed. That's why you see people like Roy Williams gone, Nick Saban gone. Like it's just different. And I understand that there are coaches that still want to approach the game the old way, and I get it. But that doesn't necessarily mean that's the best way of doing it. There's a reason why. Another thing, when you have the blue blood attached to your name, that usually means that you're good at recruiting. And while yes, Caleb Wilson is, probably going to be a top 5, top 7 player drafted, that was great. But when you look at the recruiting ranks, how North Carolina usually falls behind most of the other blue bloods, that's because Hubert Davis continuous and his coaching staff continuously went the old way. Why do you think that it took almost 3 years since he was a coach to finally get a GM? He pushed back on that. He wanted to approach it the old way. And I get it, man. I get it. But when you look at teams like UConn, when you look at teams like Duke, when you look at teams like Michigan, when you look at look at the teams right now that are still playing, right? Look at the teams right now in college basketball that are still playing. What's one thing that they have in common? They hit the transfer portal, they hit the NIL deals hard. Duke, Cam Boozer, Michigan, Elliot Cadeau and them, Arizona. Like, the fact that you continuously blew double digit leads and the fact that you were so slow to change when we talk about um the NIL and transfer portal. North Carolina was always a step, it has always been a step behind. Even going into the season, I know they finished at the 11th seed as the AP. Oh no, they were the 6th seed. But they went into the season the 29th or the 25th seed. Like for AP 20, they were 25 out of 25. I don't know who they're gonna hire, but I do know that they need to hire somebody that is going to adjust with the times, and that's something that Hubert Davis just wasn't able to do. I'm sure he's a great dude from what everyone said, a great dude, but being a great dude doesn't necessarily mean that you're a great head coach. And as much as I want my African American fellow people to succeed, you had every North Carolina is a blue bud, and now you got people talking about that they shouldn't be a blue bud. It doesn't hit the same. They're not lying when they say it doesn't hit the same, bro. Because North Carolina has not been good at recruiting, and it shows. On top of the fact of they lose a lot of games where they have leads. That's on coaching. Speaking of coaching, I'm not going to speak on this long. Um, but Will Wade, and shout out to damn, I forgot his name. I forgot his name. I'm sure his name's gonna come to me, but shout out to homie Jay Billis. Shout out to Jay Billis for pointing it out. They want to do all these restrictions and say how the transfer portal is ruining college basketball, college sports for players. But you have a coach in Will Wade who signed a massive deal to become NC State's head coach just a year ago. And 1 year later, he backs out of that and now is going back to LSU where he was in 2017. In fact, since 2017, he was at VCU, LSU, McNeese, NC State, and now LSU. And now you're telling me that there's no tampering involved, no under the table deals. But then yet, if a player did that, that'd be an issue, right? Hmm. Uh, uh, I'm gonna just say this, Felisha Legette-Jack. Um, I think you're a phenomenal coach. Uh, Syracuse had a great year, but you ran into a better team, and you continuously run into a better team when UConn. UConn is just Gino Auriemma, and you can't make the remarks that you said after the game, saying it's why do we have to keep coming up to UConn? That you're Syracuse, bro. Syracuse is in New York. UConn is in Connecticut. It's like 2 hours away from each other. You're probably gonna land in that region. If you if you if you don't want to go to UConn or you want UConn to maybe go to Syracuse, have a better regular season record. You know, you had a great record this year. The Syracuse women were great. They just weren't UConn, you know. And you can't make the stuff that you just can't do that. You know what I mean? Great coach though. Fabulous, fabulous coach. Just it's not the time to say that. Like, come on now. You look crazy. And there you have it, man. That's been today's episode of the Unpopular Podcast. I truly, truly appreciate you guys. Again, I apologize. I was sick and there was a lot going on, but I'm back and you know, back trying to get my consistency back going. So, I appreciate you guys. If you want a Popular Podcast shirt, hoodie, sweater, long sleeve joggers, the link is in the description below. I have multiple different colors, multiple different designs. Get your Unpopular Podcast merch today. Also, please subscribe to the YouTube channel. I'm trying to get as many subscribers as possible. Tell a friend to tell a friend to tell a friend to subscribe. It definitely means a lot. Um, Also, for my DSPs, my Apple Podcast, Spotify, SoundCloud, please, 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 please subscribe. Please follow. Please share. Please rate. I'm trying to go the podcast route laterally, and I cannot do without you guys' help. So I would really, really appreciate it if you guys on my DSPs, no platform is bigger than the other. Please follow, share, rate, all the nines. Also, for my socials, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, I post pretty much daily. I will be back to posting pretty much daily, let me say. And that's the quickest way to get to me. I don't mind going back and forth. Just keep it respectful, leave it in the comments, and yeah, we can debate about it. Just again, don't leave a comment and not follow. Like, what are we doing? Uh, so please follow the socials. Until next time, much love.